Have you noticed something strange about financial advice? It's everywhere. Open YouTube, invest in index funds. Open Instagram, start a side hustle. Podcast says max your 401k. Another says pay off debt first. Someone else says never pay off low interest debt. Every piece sounds intelligent. Every strategy sounds logical. Yet instead of clarity, you feel heavier. Why? Because information is not the same as structure. Most financial advice is technically correct. That's the problem. When advice is wrong, it's easy to ignore. When advice is partially correct in different contexts, it creates mental conflict. Your brain starts asking, should I invest first or build cash? Should I pay off debt or let inflation eat it? Should I buy property or stay liquid? Should I focus on growth or safety? Each path seems rational, but they can't all be first. And that's where overwhelm begins. Overwhelm is not confusion. Overwhelm is unsequenced decision pressure. Financial advice usually presents isolated tactics, but your financial life is a system, and systems require order. Imagine being told, lift weights, run daily, stretch more, eat high protein, try intermittent fasting, cold plunge, sleep 8 hours. All good advice. But without sequencing and context, it becomes paralyzing. Money works the same way. Advice assumes you know what stage you're in, what risks you face, what your margin is, what your priority should be. Most people don't, so they collect tips. And tip collection feels productive, but it doesn't reduce uncertainty. It increases it. Here's the deeper issue. Modern financial advice is optimized for attention, not integration. Each video solves one problem, but your life has multiple interconnected constraints: income stability, debt load, liquidity level, fixed costs, behavior under stress. Advice rarely addresses all of it together, so you end up with fragments, and fragments don't form stability, they form noise. In the next part, we're going to break down why even smart people feel paralyzed by financial decisions, and how conflicting correct advice creates hidden anxiety. Stay with me to the end, because in the final section, I'll show you a simple structural shift that makes financial advice feel clear instead of chaotic. If this already feels familiar, take a second and like the video. It helps push deeper financial conversations into a space full of surface-level money hacks. And subscribe to Kane Invest if you want structure-first financial clarity instead of endless tips. Let's look at someone real. Meet Aaron. Aaron is 32. He works in IT, makes about $95,000 a year, has $18,000 in savings, $22,000 in student loans, and just started contributing to his 401k. Aaron wants to do the right thing, so he starts consuming financial advice. First video says, max out your 401k immediately. Time in the market is everything. Makes sense. Second podcast says, build at least 6 months of expenses in cash before investing aggressively. Also makes sense. Third article says, pay off all student loans before investing. Guaranteed return. Logical again. Fourth expert says, if your loan interest is under 5%, invest instead of paying it off. Now Aaron is stuck. He runs the math. If he maxes his 401k, his take-home drops and savings growth slows. If he builds more cash, he delays investing. If he pays off loans aggressively, he sacrifices liquidity. If he invests instead of paying off debt, he carries psychological stress. Every path has a reasonable argument behind it. So what does he do? He hesitates. Weeks turn into months. He increases his 401k slightly, but not fully. He makes extra loan payments, but inconsistently. He builds savings, but feels like he's falling behind in investing. He's doing something in every direction, but he doesn't feel confident in any direction. That's the emotional weight of conflicting correct advice. Aaron isn't confused. He's overloaded by trade-offs. No one told him what should come first based on his income stability. What matters more given his job risk? How much liquidity is enough? When debt repayment actually improves flexibility. Instead, he got isolated tactics, each one correct in isolation, none prioritized for his structure. So his brain stays in evaluation mode, constant calculation, constant comparison, and constant second guessing. This is where overwhelm becomes exhausting, because instead of building a system, Aaron is juggling options, and juggling options doesn't create clarity, it creates mental fatigue. In the next part, we'll break down why financial advice quietly assumes stable income in predictable conditions, and why that assumption makes everything feel heavier than it should. Let's stay with Aaron. All the advice he consumed had one hidden assumption: that his income would remain steady, that markets would behave within historical ranges, that emergencies would be isolated events, that his behavior under stress would stay rational. But real life doesn't operate in stable spreadsheets. 6 months after Aaron starts optimizing his plan, something shifts. His company announces restructuring. Nothing dramatic yet, but uncertainty enters. Now every decision feels heavier. If he maxes his 401k, that money is harder to access. If he aggressively pays down loans, his liquidity shrinks. If he keeps too much cash, he worries about missing out on growth. Notice what changed. Not the math, the environment. An environment changes decision psychology. Most financial advice is built around average case scenarios, average market returns, patterns, average employment cycles, average inflation rates. But individuals don't live in averages, they live in sequencing. If a market downturn hits during stable employment, investing aggressively feels smart. If a downturn hits during job instability, liquidity suddenly matters more than returns. Same strategy, different outcome. Advice rarely addresses sequencing risk. It assumes stay invested long term, think 30 years ahead, zoom out. But short-term shocks change behavior. When stress rises, long-term thinking shrinks. Under pressure, humans prioritize safety, not optimization. That's not weakness, that's biology. Aaron doesn't fear volatility in theory. He fears volatility when it intersects with income risk. That intersection is what advice often ignores. Because financial content is easier to teach in isolation. Investing strategy, debt strategy, saving strategy. But real financial systems are interconnected. Income stability affects investment confidence. Liquidity affects risk tolerance. Fixed costs affect stress levels. Advice fragments these. Life integrates them. And when integration is missing, overwhelm grows. Because now Aaron isn't just choosing strategies, he's trying to predict the future. What if layoffs happen? What if markets drop? What if inflation spikes? What if rates change? Prediction pressure creates anxiety, and anxiety makes every financial decision feel high stakes. In the next part, we'll examine the psychological layer that makes financial advice feel personal and why comparison amplifies overwhelm even further. Let's stay with Aaron. At this point, he's not just processing financial advice, he's comparing himself. A friend tells him, "I've been maxing my 401k since 25. Another says, "I bought my first rental property last year." Someone else casually mentions, "I keep 12 months of expenses in cash." Each statement sounds like progress, but psychologically, something subtle happens. Advice turns into measurement, and measurement turns into self-evaluation. Now, Aaron isn't just asking, "What's the right strategy?" He's asking, "Am I behind?" That shift changes everything. Because once advice becomes comparison, it stops being technical. It becomes emotional. Financial advice feels overwhelming, partly because it carries identity weight. Money is tied to security, success, status, competence, responsibility. When someone says you should be investing more, it doesn't feel like a math suggestion. It feels like a competence judgment. When someone says you're holding too much cash, it feels like you're being inefficient. When someone says debt is dangerous, it feels like you made a mistake. Advice becomes moralized, and moralized decisions create pressure. Now Aaron feels he must maximize growth, minimize debt, stay liquid, avoid risk, not fall behind, not look irresponsible simultaneously. That's impossible because every financial structure involves trade-offs. You cannot maximize liquidity and maximize long-term return at the same time. You cannot eliminate all risk and maximize growth. You cannot optimize every variable simultaneously, but comparison culture implies you should. Social media amplifies this. You see people buying homes, people investing aggressively, people claiming early retirement, people celebrating financial milestones. What you don't see, their risk tolerance, their income stability, their family obligations, their fixed cost ratios, their margin. You're comparing outcomes without seeing structures. That creates distortion, and distortion creates overwhelm because now financial advice feels like a race instead of a design process. Aaron doesn't need more tips, he needs clarity on his own structure. But clarity requires slowing down, and slowing down feels like falling behind. In the next part, we'll break down the core structural mistake that makes financial advice feel chaotic, and how simplifying variables immediately reduces overwhelm. The real reason financial advice feels overwhelming isn't the advice itself, it's the lack of a framework. Let's go back to Aaron. Right now, his financial life has too many moving parts: student loans, 401k contributions, emergency savings, career stability concerns, future home purchase plans, investment allocation decisions. Each decision interacts with the others, but he's trying to optimize them separately. That's the mistake. Financial overwhelm happens when you try to optimize variables before defining constraints. Think about this carefully. Every financial system has constraints: income stability, fixed cost pressure, liquidity level, debt burden, dependence. These are foundational realities. But most advice jumps straight to optimization. Invest more, pay off debt faster, buy assets, reduce taxes. Optimization without structure increases cognitive load. Aaron isn't overwhelmed because he's incapable. He's overwhelmed because he's trying to solve a system without reducing variables first. When variables are high, decision fatigue increases. Decision fatigue reduces confidence. Reduced confidence leads to second guessing. Second guessing leads to stagnation. So what does Aaron actually need? Not another tactic. He needs hierarchy. For example, step 1, define baseline stability. Step 2, build minimum liquidity buffer. Step 3, control control fixed cost ratio. Step 4. Then optimize investments. Notice what changed? Sequencing. When decisions are sequenced, complexity shrinks. When complexity shrinks, anxiety drops. Most financial advice overwhelms because it treats every lever as equally urgent. But not every lever matters at the same stage. If Aaron has weak liquidity, debating asset allocation percentages is noise. If fixed costs are high, optimizing tax efficiency is secondary. If income stability is uncertain, maximizing growth exposure may increase stress. Without prioritization, everything feels urgent. And when everything feels urgent, the brain freezes. Overwhelm is often a signal of undefined order. In the final part, we'll bring this together, and I'll show you the structural shift that turns financial advice from chaotic noise into clear direction. Let's simplify this. Financial advice feels overwhelming because you're trying to optimize before stabilizing. That's the core mistake. Go back to Aaron. The moment he stopped asking, what's the best investment strategy, and started asking, what makes my system stable, everything changed. Instead of juggling 5 decisions, he reduced it to 3 structural questions. How stable is my income? How high are my fixed costs? How much liquidity do I have relative to risk? That's it. Notice something important. None of those questions are about returns. They're about durability. Once durability is defined, optimization becomes simple. If liquidity is low, implies build cash first. If fixed costs are high, implies reduce commitments. If income is unstable, implies avoid stacking long-term obligations. Now, investment decisions become secondary, and secondary decisions don't create anxiety. Overwhelm disappears when hierarchy appears. Most financial content throws tools at you. Very few teach order, and order creates clarity. Clarity reduces stress. When your system is stable, advice stops feeling urgent. It becomes optional refinement. That's the difference. You don't need more tips. You need fewer moving parts. Reduce fixed obligations, increase margin, sequence decisions. Stop optimizing everything at once. Financial clarity isn't about knowing more, it's about structuring better. If this changed how you think about financial advice, take a second and like the video. It helps more people move from noise to structure. And subscribe to Kane Invests if you want practical, structure-first strategies designed for real life, not just ideal conditions. Build stability first, optimize second. That's how overwhelm turns into direction.